Welcome to Discover the Difference, a podcast brought to you by C3. I'm your host, Jamie Reed. Along with Gabe Earl, we have a very unique guest on today, and Joe Laude. Joe is a Marine Corps veteran who was in Afghanistan and aided in the very end, the withdrawal of both American troops and Afghan allies that were pulled out. He was there when the suicide bomber exploded, causing a ton of chaos and trauma in the area. And as a result of those experiences, he's gone on to found an organization called OAR. OAR is an organization that helps veterans that were exposed to moral trauma, where they had to make decisions or they had to witness things that went against their moral compass. It's a form of PTSD, but it's a very vertical niche. His nonprofit is seeking out those veteran individuals who are exposed to those moral traumas and giving them the tools and resources they need to recover and enter civilian life. His story is really shining a light on an issue that many of our veterans are exposed to and have a strong need for. It was emotional, it was deep, it's impactful, and it's one with a ton of purpose. So I hope you're able to dive into this episode and really connect to it because Joe's story is amazing. So enjoy this episode. Well, take us back a little bit. Before we got started here, you're telling us you're from West Virginia.
Not West Virginia. So it's like it's a place called Loudoun County. It's been in the news all the time. So it's like not west, but east of West Virginia.
Oh, got it.
Yeah,
so that's good. That's good that you clarified that.
Yeah. Gabe's not judging you anymore. So how did you obviously went through a military career? Were you dead set on that as a kid, or how did it evolve that you decided that you wanted to pursue that path?
Yeah. So ever since I was little, I felt like it was destined that I was going to go into the military. And it got to a certain point where when I finished up in college, I was like in a kind of a lull period when I needed to do something that was purposeful and defined who I was. So I think that led me into the Marine Corps, and that's exactly what, I ended up doing.
Is that because you have family that was in the Marine Corps and the military, or what was the destined piece like? How did you feel that?
Yeah, I think it has a lot to do with my family being in. It was also kind of the environment as well. Growing up, it was, American small town. It had that patriotic feeling growing up. So it was definitely a strong national view that I had. So it definitely led me in that path.
I like the word you use, being purposeful, and that's associated with an identity too. I think when we talk to younger people these days in the civilian world, one of the things that can really miss the mark is having purpose in what they do, which then fuels your identity and your ego and those things. So when you join, do you immediately feel that in the military, or is it not until later through deployment, or how does it come together?
So I think the purpose part of it comes, I think the Marine Corps boot camp does an excellent job of instilling that purpose drive. But it kind of, when you figure it out, it's kind of tough to describe based on different person's perspectives when they enter military service. I enjoyed being around the guys who have that drive. A lot of the dudes did, but it's a different, more or less. I think it's different based on each person's perspectives. I think I didn't feel like a Marine until getting out, and I feel like I'm more of a Marine with the freedom that I have to exercise. The life decisions in what type of service I wanted to pursue. I felt like more of a Marine being out, but I have to contribute a lot of that with the service that I had while serving. So it was definitely an eye-opening thing that I felt like it was necessary for my growth and development.
It's interesting that I would definitely want to unpack that feeling more like a Marine when you're out. But in that time while you were there, did you gravitate to people that were, that had that purpose, or it just kind of felt like that all around you?
Yeah. So in the infantry, a lot of times these guys, they had nothing, it was almost an escape to get to level up in some type of regard. Um, but these guys, some of the guys in the Marine Corps who wanted to be there, who really and truly wanted to be there, uh, there's a lot of extra work that they had to put in their service, and being enlisted. For the most part, you're just following orders, and then there are certain individuals who have that purpose drive in them, um, who went above and beyond to make sure that their service was dedicated to that higher purpose.
Now, you went to college before you went to the Marine Corps. Typically, that's not typically the way to go, right? Into enlisted status.
Yeah, the enlisted
So
route.
how did that happen? How did that happen?
I think I was largely influenced in the enlisted route because of my family, entirely enlisted. Uh, it was kind of like they had a difference of opinion on the officers that they served under, and so that definitely influenced my direction in enlisting.
So it's kind of like it's a turning the wrench mindset, right? That you know how to execute all the blocking and tackling from the ground up versus just coming in at a higher level and not having that perspective. Is there, how do you see it? Like you said, your family may have influenced it initially, but now that you've experienced it and lived through it, is that the perspective you have as well, or can you get there different ways?
Yeah, I think I wish I had approached it differently, more tactfully, because I think that I didn't really necessarily wanted to leave military service. I think that it would have been more beneficial for me to look at it as more of a career. The enlisted route, it's very bureaucratic. Um, the chain of command is very difficult to deal with. There's not as much, you know, building a career until you get to a certain rank as an enlisted personnel. Um, but I think that there is some advantage in joining a little bit later with the maturity side, having some life experience. Um, Obviously, the 18, 19-year-olds are very tenacious and they like to get after it. But I think from a critical thinking perspective, going to college and gaining some life experience, it's definitely a benefactor to helping lead others and assessing certain situations and being adaptable.
But do you think the fact that you went to George Mason, right?
Mhm.
So I've heard of that school. You know, it's a pretty prestigious organization. And then enlisting, is that route part of why you said that you feel more like a Marine after you got out than you're in, or did it play a role, or what drives that?
I think it was having access when I got out to at least the peers that I had at George Mason, who were high achieving people. So it's like sometimes you lose that connection that you didn't build when you get out, and a lot of times you surround yourself with um, the individuals that you associate with in the Marine Corps, especially for the younger enlisted guys who get out and they don't have those circles or niches that have people who are established in that region. And because I went to college before that, I went back and I was surrounded by people who were trying to basically the high achiever type people who are entrepreneurs or businessmen. So I was able to kind of be around that environment for growth when I got out. And it definitely helps with transition when you are seeking those relationships out.
Oh, I'm sure. Is it seeing the forest through the trees? Like when you were an active Marine and you're in it, not
attaching to the identity as much as then you're out and you reconnect with those high achieving social circles you had prior to that, and they're recognizing you as a Marine veteran now. Is it like that? It then sets in that, oh yeah, that is what I am.
Yeah, I think the experiences that I had, and for most veterans who get out, it's a plus if you make it one. It can add or contribute to, whatever direction you end up going, and that's why part of the experience, you shouldn't just downplay it. You should definitely use it for your advantage when it comes to networking and getting involved with whatever life brings towards you.
Do you see that's typical of veterans that get out, or most people are not using it as a plus?
I think for the most part, what I've seen for the guys who do their enlistment and get out, they don't understand, or not that they don't understand, they just don't understand the power of their stories and their experience, and they don't play towards it in whatever direction that they take afterwards. I see it a lot more often with officers who get out and they've established a career in the military. They get out and they kind of, they do pretty well when it comes to their transition. It's not the same for everybody, but I certainly think that having the status of being a Marine or a soldier definitely helps.
Well, it's probably a good segue about, because you mentioned the power of using your story. Maybe this is a good chance for us to really hear about your story and that your experience, especially near the end of your deployment.
Oh yeah, it's it's an interesting thing, especially talking about the Afghan withdrawal. But I mean, if you guys want to go into that one,
yeah, let's hear it.
I think that it's definitely, everybody, saw it from afar, experienced it in the news. Everybody has, I think, their own, unique experience on it, but none of us were there. You were there, so we want to hear what that was like.
For sure.
Yeah, so I think the key word that a lot of people use when they talk about the evacuation is probably desperation. And because, it wasn't a combatant like operation. We didn't necessarily go there, even though there were people who were getting into firefights. There were people who were, engaging hostiles with hand-to-hand combat. Like, and when I say hostiles, I would say that the main hostility were the single military-aged male who were basically pushing or getting their way through the crowds and using whatever means possible to do that. But I think desperation is it's kind of it's a word that I would describe the event, but I'm trying to convey this story appropriately for you guys.
Maybe you can kind of tell us where you were at when it all kind of started to come down, and how that.
Were you put there to help with the withdrawal? Were you stationed there prior, experienced the time in Afghan, and then also experienced the withdrawal?
Yeah. So prior to the evacuation, my unit, so I was with 2nd Battalion, 1st Marines, Echo Company, and we were stationed prior to the evacuation at Saudi Arabia, a base there. And I would say, as the evacuation or the operation was becoming becoming near, we were preparing for just a standard non-combatant evacuation. But it didn't seem like that, because as everybody knows, as those final moments came about, the Taliban had infiltrated Kabul already, And we knew that we were going into a situation where we were surrounded by up to 100,000 possible, Taliban combatants. So we didn't know from the enlisted perspective that we were making any deals with the Taliban at the time. So before even going to the airport there, we thought we were going to be initially going into a suicide mission. And these individuals, I would say for all of us, before even going over there, a lot of the guys that you would watch were making peace with their families, calling them. It was definitely an interesting moment before going there. And then, just basically like getting on the plane. And I remember one of the guys, as we were flying over, was like one of our junior Marines, PFC. He was having an extremely difficult, almost like a panic attack as we were flying in. So it was, the actual emotions going in were very, very high for a lot of guys, because they didn't know what we were going to get involved with. And then, once we landed, we landed a couple, I would say a day after the airport or the airfield was cleared. And it was a very interesting landing because we were preparing to escort the plane and basically getting off on a taxiway and basically fighting off people so that plane can easily go into an area to offload. But it wasn't like that. So once we landed, it was definitely very quiet, and it was surreal being there for the first time and seeing the guys who were there for the first 2 days having the 1,000-yard stare. If you guys know what that is.
No.
What is it?
Yeah. So that 1,000-yard stare is basically when someone experiences something either traumatic or just something crazy, and then just basically staring off into nothing for it. Like it says, 1,000-yard stare. So these guys had seen a lot of things before we even arrived. So seeing the exhaustion and the amount of work that these guys had been going through, it was like 72 hours of constant going through it before we even got there. So
what were they going through?
So I would say the units that were there before us, the 82nd, the 10th Mountain Division, and some of the members of the 1st Battalion, 8th Marines, they had to undergo clearing that airfield for the planes that get there. Before, as the Taliban did infiltrate the city, the Afghan civilians ran to the airfield, and they had to deal with a massive crowd of hundreds to thousands of people. They were saying maybe 12,000 people had ran onto that airfield, and they had to push them back.
Wow.
And it was difficult because they weren't harming the civilians, but with the help of some of the Afghan units that were attached to the CIA before that, they used methods that were very, very difficult for these guys to witness, because they were running people over, they were shooting people, and making a point to these people to get off where they'll be killed. So
that's what the Afghan counterparts are doing, you mean?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Got it.
So they're
playing by different rules than what our military would play by.
Absolutely. So their rules of engagement were a lot more flexible than ours, and for the moral decision making of a typical American kid, I think it would be very difficult for us to just blatantly shoot or kill someone who was a civilian who we were there to basically rescue or help.
Wow.
Yeah. That's intense. So what transpires next?
So, the first thing that we did was we kind of established our area of operations. We offloaded all the equipment that we had, and we kind of started to work the holding areas for the moment. And seeing the first Afghan civilians in that state was definitely a eye-opening experience, because the entire time growing up throughout the global war on terror, like, and then going into the military and then seeing, like, not knowing that we would ever be deployed or be involved in a operation at that scale, it was definitely a crazy experience just being involved in something like that. So at this holding area, it was basically essentially kind of like trying to, the individuals that were able to make it past the gates, we were holding them for basically an essential amount of time before we were able to onboard them on planes. And in those holding areas, we had, just all the desperate people that were just trying to do whatever it took to get on those planes. And so it was just like basically corralling the certain individuals who were there to try to make a run for it, or things like that, and detaining certain individuals who were trying to make a run for it towards the planes. So it was
is a mix of those people. Sorry to interrupt you, but the mix of those people, is it general population, or are these people that you're screening that they were some form of ally to the U.S. military while they were there?
I would say the vast majority were the general population. And I think what added to the chaos was I would say the State Department or some other entity gave these individuals false sense of hope by giving them a certain document, and it was basically spread loaded throughout their communities in Kabul, and they all felt like they had a chance to get out of there based on whatever situation that they had, and it kind of made it difficult to assess who was really there, who had helped us, and who was there just to kind of start a new life.
What was the intent? Only to take people whose lives could have been at risk once the U.S. evacuated because they were assisting or some form of ally, and like you said, then it spread greater than that, and now you're just stuck in a difficult situation, filtering through that.
Yeah, it was a you were there trying to do whatever it took to help these guys, but at the same time you wanted to prioritize the people that were helping us, and so it got mixed up with the the individuals who were there just to survive and get away, and they had brought their families as well, so it was kind of a moral dilemma that we had, pushing people away, and then bringing on or at least looking and searching for the people that were really the ones that needed to get out of there.
How does your emotion change over the time? Because there's probably some sense of relief that you're not met with an immediate threat, but then you're met with desperation, and in some form, you're kind of playing God and giving people freedom and moving them out. That's a lot of different things all happening at one time, right?
Yeah, it was definitely there were a lot of elements to it. I think the biggest threat that we were facing were IEDs, individuals with suicide vests, that could just easily run on and create a lot of damage. And we had that intel that obviously it's Afghanistan. We knew that threat was a possibility the entire time. So backpacks, individuals with long coats or anything like that, that was always a massive threat. And I remember, assessing many of those individuals and detaining many people who were running around with backpacks on and stuff like that. but it was also, going back to the desperation of these individuals who were willing to do whatever it took to get on that plane. And they were, using different methods to do that. So there were, a lot of these Marines and soldiers had to deal with, guys who were willing to fight their way towards those planes. And so, a lot of these guys had to, essentially, and myself included, had to beat these people back forcibly.
Wow. That must have taken a toll.
I mean, it was at the time, it wasn't something that was, for myself at least, it wasn't like I wasn't doing my job. I felt like I was, doing the right thing, pushing these guys back. But at the same time, it was, when we actually got onto the gates, especially Abbey Gate, and realizing when we were pushing these guys back, the Taliban were, processing them back in, and if they found someone that was valuable, they would kill them instantly.
Wow. Wow. Did you guys encounter any IED explosives while you were there?
Yeah, so I was there at Abbey Gate when that explosion went off, and that one was the most obvious one. But we had intel on different IED. I would say just basically we had that threat going on the entire time. We had many vehicle-borne IED threats that were prevalent, and if we had that threat, that threat alone would have been a catastrophe, because the vehicle-borne IED threats are very very dangerous. Like, I would just say it would be very catastrophic if that were to happen as well.
What was the experience like on the Abbey Gate explosion?
Yeah, so for for where I was, we were kind of, I would say, about 100 meters plus, a little bit 100 meters plus, me and my guys. And when that explosion went off, we were hearing explosions and gun sounds like the entire time. But when that explosion went off, it was very noticeable that was something that was, it created a lot of chaos. And as soon as that explosion went off, we could hear gun sounds. It was distinctively clear from the gun sounds that we had, because we had suppressors on our weapon systems. And it was very obvious from my perspective that it was a complex attack that happened at Abbey Gate. And so for all of us who were, in that area, we rushed towards the we call it the X, where the explosion went off. And when we got there, it was, the realization that it was worse than it was when I, running towards that direction and seeing a helmet, or a Kevlar helmet, on the ground, one of our own, full of blood. And it was like, at that moment, I realized that we got sucker punched pretty hard. And we had to, it was just a very difficult situation to deal with at that time, dealing with the casualties, and some of them being our own. So, yeah.
Well, how long from, that event until you fully withdraw? Like, what's the time frame?
So it was about 2 days after, and during that time, we were relieved by the 82nd on that post. We closed the gates off at that moment, and we went back and started to kind of retrograde our way out of there. And during that retrograde, basically, we were just destroying everything that we could, all the infrastructure on that base, as well as the vehicles and the weapons and the radios. Everything that we could find, we were destroying. then we eventually left on the 28th of that month, which was 2 days after the 26th.
And we could talk about this for hours on end. There's so many more questions I want to go on it, but at the same time, I also do want to get to OAR, like really talk about what you're doing now and getting that message out. One last question though, when you were talking to Mia in the prep before, she noted something about the U.S. has a history of forgetfulness. How does that attach to that moment?
Yeah, so a NEO like this event, or an evacuation that was similar to this, was one that happened in Vietnam during the fall of Saigon, which was, the parallels are very similar to the type of desperation of the people who are trying to get out. But it was kind of a eye-opening experience, kind of realizing that America had did this twice now already. And it's an important part of our history to tell these stories and make sure that we don't repeat these events again. And that's part of the objectives in this foundation, is to make sure that these stories remain alive and in the psyche of the American leadership.
Absolutely. Well, wait, that's a good transition setup. Then, will you introduce the audience to OAR and how you came to found it?
Yeah. So, upon the first anniversary of the event, I felt like I was making my rounds basically with all my guys, getting on the phone with them and making sure that they were handling it okay. And I felt like we needed to do something a little bit more with the community to kind of keep the community, or at least bring the community back together. So I felt like, starting a foundation and making it, or at least, gaining ownership of our own situation, I felt like it was something that we all needed to do, to kind of at least, protect each other when it comes to, this mental health crisis that I feel like could potentially happen in the near future. So I wanted to create something that was going to be proactive in that environment. So, after, going through those phone calls and seeing some other nonprofits being started up, surrounding these events, I felt like we needed to do something within our own community to help each other out. And that's what led to creating Operation Allies Refuge.
And can you talk a little bit about how the foundation supports the group and others?
Yeah. So Operation Allies Refuge Foundation, we're focused on providing support and advocacy for veterans who have sustained moral injury, and for the service members that were in the evacuation. I would say the entire event is almost like a case study on moral injury, more or less, because throughout the entire time, these guys had to make moral decisions based on whether or not certain individuals were able to make it out of there, or you had to turn back a lot of people. So I thought that was the most pressing issue is addressing that.
Is that moral injury your reference? I hadn't quite heard it framed quite like that. You kind of hear PTSD and things like that, but the moral injury, you're creating almost like a phrase there, right? Where you're making decisions in war situations between right and wrong. Does it also encompass like what you were speaking to, where the moral, I don't know if it's moral character or how you describe it, of like the Afghan military, where you're being exposed to somebody with a different set of morals or tactics? Is it all of it, or is it just is it more internal when you're having to make decisions? Like, how do you define it?
So moral injury, from what I've been able to kind of look through, it's based on, for the most part, is going against your own code of ethics or morals, and or witnessing that unfold. So for the individuals who have had to witness people getting killed in the streets by the Taliban, or for individuals who had to turn people back and not allow them to get through. That plays a huge part on their spiritual, on the spirituality of that individual. And for the moral injury aspect, it's the consequences of those decisions that play a significance on that person. So to me, it's something that the military doesn't really talk about as often as they should. I think it's something that usually happens in the post aftermath of a certain event that kind of weighs heavily on people. And and part of the objectives of Operation Allies Refuge is to find a way to kind of connect to these individuals, and find a way that they can reach out and get the access to the best help that they can get.
So is that through like psychologists, or how are they getting help for this type of injury?
So right now, I know the VA, the Veteran Affairs centers, they're focused, at least for the most part, they put these, or characterize moral injury as, or they fit these guys into PTSD type of niche there. I think for the most part, it's different, but it's alike in a lot of ways. In ways that it's alike, it's some of the dreams and stuff that these guys get. For myself included, like having reoccurring dreams about what happened over there, is very similar to that of PTSD, but it is different in a lot of ways. I see moral injury as a spiritual situation, that for the most part, these guys, when they seek help, it's not necessarily through seeking a therapist, which is part of the treatment, in my opinion, that needs to be done. But it's also the spiritual development of that individual, and learning about how to forgive oneself from those decisions that they made. So finding a network in a way that these guys can tap into, which includes therapists, and maybe going and finding spiritual growth in certain ways, like maybe religious institutions, or other methods that way. So there's a lot that we need to unpack when it comes to all of that, and learn about and research. But I feel like there are multiple ways that you have to approach moral injury.
Well, I have a two-part question. I'm curious, like how they find you. We were introduced to you by Vaughn and through the Honor Foundation. So there's transition or support organizations like Honor Foundation, and DoD programs like SkillBridge, stuff like that. And then this is it's a layer deeper, right? And so are they getting referred to you? Do they have to find you? How do they get there? And then, how are you assessing it? Like you referenced religious and spiritual guidance and different things like that. Are you the person who is meeting with them and assessing and then trying to connect them to the right things, or how does that unfold?
Yeah. So, being at the position that we're at right now, we're basically starting from the ground up and trying to figure it out. At this moment in time, I have been, I would say the small team that I'm with right now have been receiving all the certain individual cases. But I think the best way for to reach out to us right now is finding us on our social media platforms, and then getting onto our website that way, and reaching out to us.
And are you networking with like the Honor Foundation and things like that? So as they see it, they have some perspective and can help refer those people, or?
Yeah, so part of what we're doing right now is trying to build that network that surrounds themselves with moral injury. Um, so it's very small right now, the network out there for that particular niche, but I think it's going to start growing. Organizations like Moral Compass Federation, who deals with the moral injury of the Afghanistan campaigns themselves. Um, they're a network building organization as well. Um, but yeah, it's all about the network and reaching out and getting at least the word out to other organizations.
Is there also like this feeling, or because you talk about the purpose, and most people that really believe it, I would say most Americans are very supportive of the military and its purpose. But there is that feeling of that desperation or withdraw, and now these all that effort and all that work, um does that add to the moral injury of like, why were we here in the first place?
Yeah, we share a lot of commonalities with Vietnam era veterans when it comes to just thinking about like what was the purpose behind all of that, all the blood and sweat equity that is poured into that. Um, and the way that we like to view it is, the job isn't done, the war isn't over yet, and there's a lot of work that needs to be done in order to fix these problems that we still have. And part of the purpose behind that is still tackling those issues and the issues that are going to continue to arise in the future.
Building on that, we live in a great political nation, right, where we experience freedom and things. But as a byproduct of that, there's political swings, and as American sentiment changes, it influences some of how our military has to behave. Is there a way to take the lessons of Vietnam and the way we evacuated out of Afghan, knowing that our political environment changes a lot to maintain the balance that freedom requires, but be able to learn from it and not be cast back into those in the future? Do you see something there that can help that?
Yeah, this is the thing about Afghanistan and the situation that's still over there. It still needs to be like involved in our political system, because now that Afghanistan has been, when we left Afghanistan, now it's almost become a safe haven for terrorism again. And if not, um, their capabilities now are probably has made them even more brazen and has emboldened them. Um, Especially since the new technology that's out now, and uh, the resources that we essentially had given them when we left. It's only going to make things more complicated in the future, in my personal opinion.
When
So
you
I
say
think that
sorry, go
Yeah,
ahead.
so I think that the political system needs to have, stay focused on that. And not only that, but we also have an influx of new of refugees in this in this country alone. And if we don't stay on top of that, then there's potential for certain individuals to become disenfranchised, and
No.
that's just not a good outcome in the future for sure.
Mhm. You mentioned that, when you talk about resources, are you talking about all the training and military equipment and things that we left behind?
Absolutely. Yeah, it's you know, they're I would say that the Taliban are a lot stronger than when we first met them. They've grown through experience, and they've also grown with now they have the innovation and the technology to basically adapt with the times. And Al Qaeda is back, and they're still doing their thing with that. So I think the situation of Afghanistan is a lot worse than the way that it was in the past.
What do you need? You're at the onset of what you've created, a really important mission with your foundation. What do you need next to get to where you want to take it?
Yeah, so I would say the next thing that we need to start doing, or start getting things, or at least setting the tone, is getting the message out first, and then establishing relationships and partnerships with other organizations, and that includes also being finding people that we can relate with when it comes to sponsorships, and kind of building our donor base. So it's it's a it's definitely difficult, because it's almost like getting an MBA on the fly, and trying to learn the whole business and nonprofit as quickly as possible. But it's I'm here for the ride. I'm here for the long haul. So I'm super excited about what we can do and what we can bring in the future.
It's probably been gratifying just to connect with a lot of people that have had the similar experience, because there's probably a healing in that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. It's part of the storytelling aspect of our foundation is also kind of bringing people together based on their story. And when people share their story, they don't realize how much that affects other people within their own community. Because when they hear that there's recognition going on, and people aren't forgetting about what happened over there, it really does kind of alleviate the feeling of being forgotten.
Yeah. A lot of people have trouble sharing their story. How has it been? How have you been able to do it?
Oh, I mean, I've had difficult times telling my story. It's definitely a process. It's definitely a work that you have to kind of dive into. And it takes some time to kind of tell that story appropriately, and eventually, like the way that we see the foundation going when it comes to storytelling is, we're going to be patient with people, and allow them to tell it when they're ready for it. First of all, and then I think, in time, I think we'll be able to send out the right message that Americans need to pay attention to what happened in history, so that we don't repeat it again.
Yeah, I was just actually, it was the last podcast we did with Scott Mann. After that, I asked my father about Vietnam, and the first time I've heard part of his story, 50 years later. And I know he still, suffers night terrors from that experience. So the work that you're doing and people that are getting involved now I think it's going to really be healing for them.
Yeah, 100%. Thank you.
Yeah, curious, is there a different body of resources out there for people who are enlisted individuals in the military versus special force or officers? And is that part of what's going on here, or how does that play a role?
Yeah, so I mean, that's an interesting point that you brought up. There are a lot of organizations that are centered around soft units. And there are some for enlisted as well, but it's not as I guess it's the recognition for the enlisted guys isn't, I would say it's not as popular as it is for the soft guys, but I definitely think that it's something that is building. There are definitely different units or different organizations out there for enlisted guys, but this is something that's we've been working on to kind of bridge that gap through the network.
Should we go rapid fire?
Tee it up, baby.
What's your favorite comfort food?
Cheeseburgers.
What is it? Cheeseburgers?
Cheeseburgers. Oh yeah.
Oh yeah.
Especially when they're doubled up.
Gabe was trying to fish out some West Virginia answer on that one. It's
He's-
east of West Virginia.
That's right.
If you had a magical power, what would it be and why?
Oh man, I would definitely be, what do you call it when you can just jump from one place to another?
Like teleporting.
Teleporting, yeah.
I thought you'd be like some spiritual healer genie or something.
No, I definitely would be able to teleport. That would be my thing.
Yeah, you're already doing the spiritual work.
There's probably a lot of these things, but what's the most adventurous thing that you've done?
Oh, I would say those 2 weeks in Afghanistan is probably the most adventurous part of my life. I would think that was, just the amount of different things that were happening all at once. That was definitely an adventure alone. So
yeah.
If there was a book or a movie that just had a significant impact on your life, is there one that comes to mind that you would cast out to the listeners?
Yeah, I would say in my life, I think the Saving Private Ryan was probably my favorite movie that had a major effect on my path.
It was like almost too real.
Oh yeah.
Last one here is what would you say is, one of the best piece of advice that you've received?
I would say one of the things that comes to my mind is staying, one foot at a time. I guess would be the best one. Is as long as you're getting 1% better every day, you'll be on your path. And it takes time with different things, but always, going back to the foundations of, are you doing the workout? Are you waking up at this, the right time? Or are you going to sleep at the right time? Those are all the things I think is that, taking those ones, that 1% getting better at a time. So, yeah, I'm trying to figure all that out too, but
we're all a work in progress. Have you read Atomic Habits?
I have not.
That 1% concept, it's laid in throughout the book, but it's something that's pretty prevalent in the beginning of it. It just came to mind. But so obviously your foundation is what's next, but anything beyond that for you personally, what's next in the chapter of your life?
Yeah. So I feel like I'm going to be going back to school. I think I'm going to pursue something in psychology, and, we'll, kind of tie that in with everything that I'm doing right now.
Awesome.
So this is the part where we ask you to reflect back on younger Joe, and what kind of advice now would you give your younger self?
Yeah, I would say it's not going to be easy, but you got to stay focused and stay away from the distractions.
All right.
Awesome. Well, our podcast is called Discover the Difference. That's what we're going to launch you out at. Gabe's question was around discovery and reflection. My question's about as you reflect on things, what is it that makes you uniquely you and different?
I would say, I think, I don't know, to be honest with you. I think everybody is definitely unique in a certain way, but I think that, I have a lot of weaknesses when it comes to certain things. And I've been getting comfortable being uncomfortable with those weaknesses, especially now, and getting out there and doing things in order to get better. So I think if I were to say something about that, it would be about being willing to get out there and do things that makes me uncomfortable.
Yeah, putting yourself in vulnerable situations to advance.
That's definitely the growth mindset.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Although I think you got to do some work on reframing and accept credit a little bit, because the answer didn't reflect that.
Yeah, because those weaknesses are also your strengths too.
Yeah. I agree with that.
All right, cool. You referenced it earlier, but why don't you just let us say it again, please, of where our listeners can find more information about you, and we'll share those links when we publish the podcast.
Yeah, you can find us. I think our biggest platform is on Instagram. It is at, or our handle is at OAR Foundation. And then from there, you can look us up from Operations Allies Refuge Foundation.org. And then, we're on every social media platform as well, but that is probably the most active one amongst all of them. And then, if anyone's in the DC area, I would love to, link up, and you can reach out to me through the website as well.
Yeah, Jamie's only on Facebook, so are you on Facebook?
I'm on Facebook, but I don't do too much on Facebook.
You're just kidding.
Yeah, we definitely have some people we want to link you up with after this as well. But when you're probably too young for this reference, but when Mia was, kind of debriefing us, I'm like, oh, OAR is my favorite band. I'm like, you don't even know who they are, do you?
Well, OAR, does that stand for something?
of a revolution.
No, I have no idea. No idea.
You have to look them up.
Now you can connect with the music.
Yeah. They're great guys and supportive of the military too. So maybe look them up. Well, hey, Joe, thanks for coming on the podcast today. I wish we could have spent another 2 hours with you. There's so much more there I'd love to learn about. So we'll have to look you up next time we're out east and see if we can't do it over a beer or something.
Yeah, if you ever come to San Diego, we're here too.
For sure. Yeah, I'll keep that in mind, guys.